the quote unquote real kind of life we share with a few people who mean to us. The relationships are deeper, and we are far more comfortable discussing those things with them. And that could be irrespective of our worldly touch with them. Now I use the worldly touch because I don't want to restrict this conversation to social media.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, though I'm not actively there on social media, but I know some very close friends who are there. I mean, I've had instances where I have had a friend who we were supposed to meet for an evening or something. They were supposed to come home, and then they said something else has come up, so we won't be able to. I said, okay, no worries. And then later that night, I think my husband saw a post and said, "Oh, these guys are out here somewhere, uh, partying somewhere or gone for dinner or something." And my first reaction was, "How stupid is that?" Right? I mean, I didn't feel anything that they didn't come over because it saved me a lot of cooking and all that stuff. But I was thinking, this is the trap of being on social media because it's hard to be consistent with the lies that one has to say to keep up with that pretense, right? So yeah, something like that. I feel it must be quite effortful as well, doing and being in a certain way on social media and off it, and trying to keep it in the same frame for all parties involved, etc. So yeah, I thought that was very hilarious. And then of course I made sure I told these people that, oh, you guys seem to have had a very good time, and there was no denying, right?
You clearly enjoyed that. Because
Sorry?
you enjoyed that moment in your
Oh,
road trip.
absolutely. I was like thinking, yeah, you should have thought twice, or you should have said, okay, we didn't come over, but we are here. But it was like, yeah, so social media is all down to how you can make it work for you. I
Hmm.
think it is an art in trying to make it work for you.
Okay.
Uh, yeah.
I uh, I don't want to go off topic. I in fact enjoyed this episode so much because this episode that you narrated, because this is exactly the point of the podcast, truth in the time of fake news. And while
Uh,
so now I would want to open the discussion to a little more umbrella kind of point of view. So we blame uh, the government, the organizations, uh, the biggies of every kind for the fake news and for whatever is happening. But here is an example of how personally we find it so difficult. I was thinking, what would I have done? I would have called you and said, look, there is some other party that is suddenly happening. And while I regret that, but I think I want to have a good time. All of us are kind of deciding to go there. And sorry, I'll make it up some other time. And sorry to, and I've done that couple of times, and it hurts. It hurts after years also. But the one thing that does not hurt is that yes, you said the truth. What meant to you at that point of time.
yeah.
Um, I think that is what is important. So, are we are we running away from responsibility when we make it very big? When we say, okay, this country is doing it like this, or these governments are like these, or these organizations are behaving in a lesser than uh, rightly moral sense. Are we being holier than thou because we ourselves cannot claim to sometimes be Jennifer? Would you remember any episode where you realized that you could not stand up to the value that you had, and it kind of eats into you at any point of time, small or big?
Yeah, very often actually.
Oh,
So, meaning, yeah, it's a stand that you take, and then you knowingly know whether you're doing right or wrong, which I think is even more difficult to live with. But it does happen. So I had a business partner I was working with, and we we have our own strengths, both of us, in our own ways. But there were times where she lacked a certain set of experience which I knew I had, and then there were situations in which I felt that I had to maneuver through them and like leave her out of it consciously, which I wouldn't want to do. Being a partner, right? You want to work hand in hand with your partner. You want to be open. You want to be transparent, but sometimes you need to make those choices because you are looking at the bigger picture and you want to do it um, as how do I put it, like well without ruining that relationship. And I think you do it, you knowingly do it. And I don't know if it is right or wrong, but I feel like that there needs to be a right way of doing things, even if it's not ideal. And if
Okay.
you can manage to keep up to that, I think it's fair.
So how did your partner react to those kind of incidents?
So we've had those conversations. We have before and after, sometimes after, because yeah, she must have probably been taken off guard. And I've had those conversations and we've had our share of arguments. But I think in spite of that, we have that understanding that the bigger picture is being taken care of. That if I'm doing something, it's to achieve something which will probably benefit both of us. So it's not to just keep you out of the loop, but it's to ensure that something is done in the best possible way, uh, in the way that my experience is lending to that situation, and I'll just do what is right. So
Okay.
we've had that conversation, and we're thankfully fine in that space.
So Jada, is it easy to be so truthful with everyone?
No. Um, Sorry. No, I have a question for you, Jennifer, or maybe it's just more of a thought.
Yeah.
Do we need to say something is right or wrong?
You don't you don't need to say what is right or wrong, but you probably, it's a feeling that you have, like you feel that might be right or wrong. Like I feel it's wrong to have probably left her out, but to someone else that might not be wrong, because if they were looking at it and they felt that yeah, I just handled the situation better, then that wasn't wrong. So yeah, you're right, it might be a personal opinion, maybe it wasn't really wrong either. Yeah,
Yeah,
personal.
I mean, the reason I asked you was because for me also, it's an ongoing everyday learning with interactions with people and, colleagues. And I mean, I'm self-employed. I only have myself to talk and brainstorm with. But that occasion where I do interact with other people on a more deeper level, whether it is work transactions or other stuff that I'm trying to do, I do feel that way. But increasingly, I feel, why do we need to categorize something as right or wrong? Why can't we just look at it? Okay, it was needed at that point in time, and just accept it for what it was, whether it's the experience or the outcome, and not necessarily bucket it into a certain thing.
Okay.
No, and I'm quite glad that you feel like that, because otherwise it's I agree, it's a lot of guilt that one lives with also when you're
Yes.
trying to do the right thing more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you're trying to do the right thing, it may be possible that we may not end up doing the right thing, because you're kind of telling yourself that you got to do something as right as possible. But then I guess along the journey, even we may not ourselves really know whether it was right or not.
True, true.
Okay. So
Yeah, that's all.
I find this interesting that both of you are saying we should not judge, and both of you are quite categorical that we should be looking at the right thing to do. And while you are claiming the opposite, but the underlying current that I saw both of you were concerned about is the right way of things. So yeah, this is where my question to yeah both of you comes from. See, we are a product of the society. We are living amongst people. There are times where when I was working on the initial part of the values workshop, what am I going to do? I chanced upon a book which is about lying, by some kind of person from Harvard School, very heavy-handed, and but they had chapters on white lies. I was like, who the hell can? How is it easy to explain something like this to anybody? And I dropped it after reading one or two chapters. I said, this is just too much. Uh, but yeah, this guilt and this self-judgment. How can one demarcate and say, no, I know right, or I am at peace with myself? How do you bring that about when, suppose, to continue Jennifer's example, if the partner would have really minded that, no, I also wanted to contribute during that particular meeting, they might have been right. For all you know, we cannot, this is all only in hindsight, they got the client and so they are okay, all's well that ends well. But suppose it doesn't go that way, and I could have changed the outcome by doing this. Jennifer, you shouldn't have done this, which is what you do in your head. That's why you're guilty, whether they think or like that or not. My question is not about them so much, because any which way you cannot control other people and other events. How does one make peace with a situation that goes bad when one has been truthful?
I think the only way you can make peace is by having that discussion with the person involved. Only then can you actually make peace, because that's when you will know what they feel about what you've done. And if they are fine with that, you will let it pass. But if they're not, that is what will then stay with you. So yeah, so like I've had that conversation, and yeah, we've had our share of like, oh, if I was there, probably I had this to offer, or you were not being considerate. And I told them my point of view is that while you do have an opinion, but I feel like you come across really strong. So there was a need for someone to be neutral in that situation, and I feel that I did that better. And so we've gone back and forth in that conversation, and we've come to an understanding that yeah, maybe that was the right thing to do. So then that's helped me pass that thing, and that is why I'm comfortable enough to have that conversation today with you guys. Yeah, if I didn't have that conversation, if I just kept it to myself and I lived with the fact that, oh, this is what I done, probably might not be able to move on from it.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe.
Sorry. Sujata, what strikes me is it's so beautiful that she could have that conversation. We have, I think, we've been old enough and brash enough and young enough and cocky enough to make a lot of relationships go bad with our attitude. We know that there's sometimes you can't have that conversation because the other person doesn't want to be party to any conversation at that point. In that kind of scenario, how does one reconcile oneself to now that I've done this, even right or wrong? That part stays with us, but I'm saying, how do you make your peace with that scenario?
I think firstly, when you have a conversation of something similar to Jennifer said, or even if you don't end up having the conversation, and if that other party continues to feel the way they do, especially if it is not a positive outcome,
Okay.
with all our best interests in mind, I think we will never be able to know how they feel. There will be a part of our ego which will say you are the right one here because you felt you are doing the right thing and you had the right thing in mind. So it will end up being you, I. So that is one. And secondly, I think the only way you make peace with it is if you're less arrogant and haughty, you will be like, okay, maybe next time I will deal with it a little bit differently or more sensitively, and then make peace with it. Or else, I'm guessing, like what Bunty said, then the relationship will just hit the road, I guess.